This is the final report on Pushpack's delamination case. It's kind of an interesting case and a very good example of how to refine your pattern recognition for biofilms. This is the PA, and this is how the case looked clinically. The cone beam shows the extent of the delamination area fairly well. The sagittal view shows it as well. The case was extracted and sent to me. This is Pushpack's diagnosis page and testing. The tooth tested normal. This is his summary page with his notes. You can pause it and read his notes if you want. They're fairly comprehensive. This is his final report page. And when I got the tooth, I took some radiographs of it from several angles, and you can clearly see the extent of the delamination. And then when we took pictures, some of the delaminated cement you could chip off like a scab from a wound. And we took pictures of both what we call the PDL side and the root side. And the histological and SEM pictures of each side was completely different. So on the root side, the side that faces the root surface, had a large biofilm. This is the PDL side, and that looked like just normal cementum. This is the root side after the delaminated cementum had been dried out, so you can see a fairly extensive matrix of biofilm pretty much everywhere along the internal aspect of the root side. Then I took the tooth in the coronal side, I sectioned it axially, horizontally, and decided to look edge on at some of the delaminated area and was hoping to find maybe some information on what could be the cause of it or contributing to the cause of it. We didn't have much luck really in learning anything about the etiology of the delamination by looking at this, but I thought I would try. And then I'm taking some pictures of what the delamination areas look like. And after it was dried, if you just touched the cementum, it had a tendency to flake off. This is the axial view. And my hope was we could look in there and maybe learn something about the etiology. But we were not really successful in learning very much by doing that. But I'll show it anyway, just so you can see that sometimes science is completely unsuccessful. So this is the root side. And when you go into it, it's actually a very good exercise if you're trying to refine your pattern recognition on what biofilms look like. So here you can see individual organisms and also organisms that are buried in EPS. So you have a pretty good sense of what to look for when you're looking for EPS embedded organisms. They do have a certain presentation. So when you go into almost any area on the root side of the delaminated cementum, it was just a massive, massive biofilm, every single place that I looked. And sometimes it just looked pretty smooth. It was just completely covered with EPS, but you can always detect the outline of the organisms. So as I mentioned to Rick in our discussion, bacteria range in size from 0.2 microns to almost 8 microns. So when you're helping to decide just simply by size, you want to look at the scale marker, and that can help you decide what you're looking at. So as you look at these, get used to noticing the micron sizes. And I'm looking at various areas here, and they all pretty much gave the same presentation, although in many areas, There were many long rod-shaped bacteria as well. So obviously you have a multitude of species present on the root side of the delaminated cementum. And whether this is um, involved in the etiology of it or whether it's just a contaminant after or some combination of that, we really can't say. But the root side was covered with the biofilm, and the cemental side on the PDL side, I did not find any bacteria at all. So that was a very, very unusual finding. Here you can see the planktonic nature of some of the biofilm. And then when we looked more cervically at just kind of the denuded uh, surface after the cementum had been chipped off, that surface was also covered in a biofilm. So the biofilm was not only on the root side surface of the delaminated cementum, but also on the root surface itself, right next to the dentin. And when you look at this, it's a little harder to tell, but if you look carefully, you can detect individual bacteria that are interspersed throughout the whole ligament type structure. So you see the uh, collagen of the ligament. And then when you look at the side, I tried many, many ways to look uh, at this from different angles to see if we could determine anything about the etiology of the delamination effect. And we're really unsuccessful in that, but it is interesting looking at what you see against the root surface uh, underneath the delaminated. So you're basically against the dentinal surface here. And when you look at it, it was covered with a biofilm. And there you can kind of see the biofilm on the north side in EPS. And you can make out the different shaped bacteria. And when we look at an area that just looked just completely virgin, there you have an interesting finding where you have what's apparently a dentinal surface or a cemental surface with cementoblasts present on the surface that are laying down cementum. So this is cellular cementum right up against the dentinal surface of the tooth with a layer of um, acellular cementum below it. So this was kind of an interesting finding. And I looked at many different areas at the edges of the cementum to see if I was actually looking for fungi, but I didn't find any because prior to this we had found fungi, but I did not find any fungi. But uh, pretty much everywhere we looked on the dentinal surface and on the cemental surface, there was a very, very robust biofilm, uh, sometimes easily identifiable and other times completely embedded in EPS. There you can see, you can make out the individual forms, but there's a lot of EPS there as well. So I hope this helps you in your pattern recognition of uh, learning how to identify biofilms. I also wanted to do a H&E, looking at these from the axial direction to see um, if I could detect anything. So we did an H&E looking down on it and also a Brown and Bren. But sectioning these uh, was very, very difficult, and the sections were not good. So I have to learn how to section teeth like this. I don't think they were decalcified enough for me to actually get a good section. But here you can see acellular cementum and cellular cementum. but I was not able to detect any bacterial there.